All right. Are we live? I believe we are. Check, check, 1, 2. Wow, this has been a long time coming. Yeah, welcome. This was not a scheduled live. This was just kind of an impromptu live. We haven't done this in a few months, so we've had a few technological upgrades, and thanks to the family, Joe, he's you'll see him as Sup Swoles in the comments. Help me out big time from the from the computer to the softwares, just helping your boy get set up for some of these boxing live chats. So I'm expecting I'm not expecting a lot of people to be filling in. Again, I didn't schedule this. I just really desperately want to get the ball rolling again. It's one of those things where, you start doing something, you get into the groove of doing something. When you stop doing something, yes, I was still issuing out the previews and the recaps and so forth, but in terms of the lives, once I stopped and I wanted to set a date to start it again, that date continuously got pushed back. So I'm like, you know what? Let me just do a live, set it up, and just go boom. No announcement, no anything like that. So here we are back in the saddle with the live chats, and then going forward, I hope to schedule these with some regularity, whether that's once a week, twice a week. We'll pick that up as we go along. But right now, there are a few topics that I really want to cover. And, this has been a pretty historic year boxing wise, just in terms of the calendar, the fights that we have been able to see. I feel like boxing's one of those sports where we are so conditioned to kind of take what we're given. So if we're given like a B level fight, a B minus level fight, even if it's not the matchup that we want to see, fighter A in, we say, okay, we'll take it. For instance, at the very beginning of the year, or was it the end of last year when Gervonta Davis fought Hector Garcia, nobody was calling for Gervonta Davis versus Hector Garcia, but it was better than a lot of the other fights we'd been getting. So it's like, okay, if this is going to truly be an interim fight leading into Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia, okay, I'll take it. But I feel like we are left kind of accepting some of these B minus level fights in terms of the quality of the matchup. Do I watch the lower weight classes? Blake Arwood? Yeah, I do. In fact, we're going to get into, the fight announcement that was made between Bam Rodriguez and Sonny Edwards. I'm actually pretty excited about that one. And then we're obviously going to get into Joshua Franco's upcoming fight this coming weekend against Kazuto Ioka. That fight is taking place in Tokyo. It's going to be early tomorrow morning. So if you're on the West Coast like I am, I'm going to be setting my alarm for like 3 o'clock in the morning to catch that one. And Joshua Franco, missed weight by 7 pounds. So in that Franco versus Ioka fight, it's only going to be Ioka who is going to be qualified to walk away with that title. So these guys had fought before and it resulted in a draw. And the fact that Franco missed weight, it's his brother Bam Rodriguez who basically went down a weight class so he could allow his brother Joshua Franco to compete for titles at 115. So Bam Rodriguez, who a lot of people were starting to put in their, pound for pound top 10 in 2021 and 2022 to a degree, but he basically deferred to his big brother saying, hey, you handle business at 115. It's all good. I'll go back down to 112 because Bam Rodriguez was having big success at 115. He beat Sor Rungvisai. Before that, he beat Carlos Cuadras. And so then he goes back down to 112 so his brother Joshua Franco could handle business at 115. And then what do we get? Joshua Franco blows weight by a few pounds. Like, he missed weight pretty badly. So I wonder if Joshua Franco is now going to go to 118, which would then pave the way. Bam Rodriguez, as I mentioned, is about to fight Sonny Edwards at 112. I wonder if that is actually going to pave the way for Bam Rodriguez to then go back to 115 now that his brother can't make weight anymore, and then compete there. Bear with me for just a second. That's what I like to call the Marco Rubio. I don't know if you remember that that presser that he gave where he went off camera, took a little sip. But yeah, like I said, we're gonna keep this one pretty light. Usually in my live chats, I stick to a somewhat rigorous schedule and say, you know, I want to cover this topic, then this topic, then this topic, and I just kind of like hammered the way through it. We're gonna kind of take it easy on this one. Again, we're just kind of getting back in the saddle, and there's really a lot to cover. I plan to be on this one for maybe 45 minutes to an hour, something like that. But we're going to get to some pretty good topics. Combat Corner asks, who should Canelo fight next, Benavidez or Charlo? So that pretty much allows us to segue into the lead story for this live chat. And that is Canelo Alvarez, or it's reported that he just signed a 3-fight deal with PBC. And then, you know, I saw Eddie Hearn's Boxing Social interview kind of reacting to it. Because remember, Eddie Hearn has had Canelo for the majority of his last like 8 fights. He's had him for like 7 of his last 8 fights. Basically, almost everything Canelo's done, except for the Caleb Plant fight, since Canelo left Golden Boy, has been with Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, right? So Canelo's signing with PBC. You look at the guys who they have in their stable at 168 especially. It's David Benavidez, obviously Caleb Plant, Jermall Charlo's at 160, but you know, Jermall Charlo would happily go up to 168 to compete with Canelo if his name is called, right? Everybody would take the Canelo fight, which is a little bit interesting. And we're going to get to the idea and the rumor that the first fight in this new deal for Canelo is going to be against Jermall Charlo. We're going to get to that. But I feel like most of us thought that it was going to be against Dimitri Bivol, but it seems like those negotiations turned south because Dimitri Bivol was insisting that he come down to fight Canelo in his weight class. Because remember, when they fought the first time, it was at 175 light heavyweight. Dimitri Bivol won convincingly, even though those scorecards read, 2 of the scorecards read 115 to 113, or was it all 3? It was much closer on the cards than the fight was as we saw it, right? But Canelo was insisting, no, let's keep everything the same for this rematch. I'll come right back to your weight class, 175. Let's do it again. Dimitri Bivol's like, no. I'm trying to make history myself. What do I stand to gain fighting you and beating you twice at 175? Let's up the ante. I'm going to challenge you. Now that I've beaten you with you challenging me in my division, I'm now going to come to 168, fight you there, and take your belts. And it sounds like there was just kind of a stalemate, largely based on that, at least reportedly. So those negotiations fell apart, which, you know, I'm like, dang, like Dimitri Bivol really stood his ground. Usually people just kind of acquiesce to the A-side fighter, and, you know, much like Ryan Garcia did in the negotiations with Tank Davis. I found it interesting that Dimitri Bivol was so insistent that he kind of get his way in a few of those items, you know. So it looks like that fight is falling apart. I'm just hoping, since that one fell apart, that we do at some point this year or hopefully early next year that we get Dimitri Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev for all the belts at 175. Now, Beterbiev still has to handle business in his mandatory against Callum Smith, but that's my light heavyweight dream fight. Dimitri Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev. But back to Canelo. He signs this 3-fight deal with PBC, and the reports are that the first fight is going to be against Jermall Charlo, which on its surface isn't a bad idea, right? The problem is Jermall Charlo has now been out of the ring for 2 years. And when you look at his inactivity, coupled with the fact that he's never competed at 168, you know, we've been wanting Jermall Charlo to fight Canelo for like years, since they were both at 154, let alone 160 or 168. I'm talking a few years ago when both Charlo brothers were at 154. And when both Charlo brothers were at 154, I always looked at Jermall Charlo as being the better of the two. Now, it's Jermell Charlo that's holding all the belts as it stands at 154, although I can't wait to see him fight Tim Tszyu. It's just that the conditions that Canelo is now entertaining a fight with Jermall Charlo after all these years of this fight never happening or never really coming close to happening, you're going to wait for a 2-year layoff for Jermall Charlo and then invite him into a weight class that he's never competed in? Now, this isn't Canelo's fault. It's not Canelo's fault that Charlo's been out of the ring for the last 2 years. And I really wish that Charlo was able to take a fight in the interim. Just anybody, fight anybody at 166 or 168, just to get your legs back under you, to compete once in that division. Give me something. Don't just go from, 24 plus months of inactivity to fighting Canelo Alvarez in your ring return. Like, I think that Charlo at his absolute best, like the Charlo that was fighting Derevianchenko 2 years ago, or close to 3 years ago. It was September of 2020 when Jermall Charlo fought Derevianchenko. Jermall Charlo at his best, I do actually think could give Canelo a run for his money. But if you're going to bring him out of inactivity for 2 years to then fight Canelo, that I just feel like that lessens his chances and any likelihood of him winning. Like, look, if I would have put his chances at beating Canelo previously at, say, 35%, I would put it at closer to 20% with the inactivity. And he's been coming back from a back injury, personal issues. I would have just loved to have seen at least one tune-up fight, comeback fight for Jermall Charlo before we start talking Canelo, EK, what's going on? Long time. Yeah, good to see you. So if this Jermall Charlo fight, yeah, you're right. Canelo might not be in his prime, but look, the Canelo that I saw put that beating on John Ryder, and yes, Canelo does tend to tire in the late rounds. Look, I don't think that I've seen a degradation in his performance to a degree where I think that degradation offsets or balances out Jermall Charlo's inactivity. I look at that inactivity and coming back from injury as being more significant than any slight degradation we might have seen in Canelo. Because, like, what have we seen from Canelo since he more or less conquered the 168-pound division? Let's say since he stopped Caleb Plant. We saw him lose to Dimitri Bivol, which, maybe he would have never beaten Dimitri Bivol. That's a possibility. Now, people forget, going into that fight against Bivol, Canelo was a heavy favorite. It wasn't until we saw him lose to Bivol round over round where it's like, well, yeah, that wasn't going to happen, right? So now that we've seen how that fight played out, I feel like there's almost like a new assessment of Canelo's abilities, because a lot of people thought that not only would Canelo beat Dimitri Bivol, but that he could then pivot and fight Artur Beterbiev at light heavyweight. That's how inflated our view, our collective, or at least most of our collective view of Canelo was at that time. I mean, he was just rampaging through that 168-pound division. So head movement. Okay, so are we seeing a degradation in Canelo's head movement? Look, when he fought Daniel Jacobs, I thought that his head movement was sublime. I'm like, damn, I didn't know Canelo had it like that. Maybe we're seeing less head movement, which, I mean, that is a thing that is tied to age. Like, even if you are just kind of like a workout warrior, right? And you like to either spar or work the bag, if you are moving your head and your torso, if you try doing that for a few minutes, you'll notice that your back starts getting tired very quickly, especially if you're in your mid-30s, late 30s, early 40s, whenever. You start tiring a lot quicker in your lower back and in your legs when you're, with the trunk movement. So maybe we're seeing a slight degradation in Canelo's head movement. But at least in the first half of the fight, I think that Canelo still has a lot of his skills intact to where I would favor him heavily over Jermall Charlo. So, especially because like the Jermall Charlo that we saw fight Juan Montiel, the same Montiel that got obliterated by Carlos Adames, who fights this coming weekend, and the same the same Montiel who got obliterated by Jaime Munguia several years ago. He went the distance with Jermall Charlo, and not only that, he looked like he was kind of wearing Jermall Charlo out. So, and that was Jermall Charlo's last fight before this 2-year layoff. So I say all that to say, I don't hate the fight between Canelo and Jermall Charlo, if that is Canelo's next fight. It's just, it's the timing of when you fight Jermall Charlo. Like, to me, just like Mayweather and Miguel Cotto, or Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, if you look at the timeline of boxing, there were so many other opportunities and so many other points of that timeline, of that career trajectory, that would have made Mayweather versus Cotto a lot more interesting. That would have made Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao a lot more interesting. It's almost like if Canelo decides to fight Demetrius Andre 2 years from now, like, where will Andre be, skill-wise at that point? Or, I thought that he waited a little long to fight Triple G. Triple G was like in his mid-30s by the time Canelo decided to fight him. Would that fight have played out? I mean, I thought Triple G won the first fight via decision, but we're not going to relitigate that. But if that fight happened 2 years prior, I felt like you would have gotten a better Triple G in there. So the timing is just a little bit funny with this version of Canelo versus Jermall Charlo, but we'll see. But to me, this whole thing just reeks of Canelo finding creative excuses not to fight David Benavidez right now. To me, that's what this is coming down to. And look, I've been a defender of Canelo's fight-by-fight schedule. I've got family, like my cousin Benji. Like, he'll give Canelo a lot of crap about fighting guys who he thought were kind of blown up reputation-wise. Like, he thought, he thinks that Billy Joe Saunders isn't all that Callum Smith isn't all that. I'm like, yo, when Canelo came out of that, that period where he was leaving Golden Boy and we thought it was going to be a long court battle before he could fight again, when they announced that Canelo would be fighting Callum Smith, I'm like, damn, word? Because I looked at, Callum Smith as being like a real threat. I have a lot of respect for Callum Smith. I think that we might get a very interesting fight between Artur Beterbiev and Callum Smith. We'll see. But I've defended Canelo against Callum Smith, against Billy Joe Saunders, against, Daniel Jacobs, and you name it, against Caleb Plant. I thought that Canelo Alvarez, when you consider the other guys who were comparing him against, there is no question who's had the tougher schedule, who's fighting the tougher opponents when you look at like a 3-year span, a 5-year span. I feel like Canelo has fought a lot of like A-, B+ fighters, which is more than you could say for most elite level boxers in this modern era, right? But if Canelo doesn't fight David Benavidez next, especially after what we saw David Benavidez do against Caleb Plant, it's like, what are you waiting for? You can no longer say that the guy hasn't paid his dues, that he hasn't beaten anybody, or that the public doesn't want to see it. No. If you did a survey right now of who people want to see Canelo fight, my guess is that 70% plus, 75% plus of the voters are going to say David Benavidez. I think we all want to see Canelo versus David Benavidez. So Benavidez is at 168. He's one of your mandatories right now. And you're going to choose to fight Jermall Charlo, who's never competed at 168? Who doesn't have a belt at 168, who's not one of your mandatories at 168. My thing is why? Like, why not fight David Benavidez? Now, Canelo signing a 3-fight deal with PBC gives us hope that, okay, if it's not the very next fight, where he fights David Benavidez. Let's say he fights Charlo. Let's say he beats Jermall Charlo via decision. Well, then what? You've got to fight somebody else within that PBC stable. Then will it be David Benavidez? Or if, David Benavidez fights David Morrell and Morrell wins that, are you then going to fight David Morrell? My thing is, if it's not this fight, it's got to be the next fight when you fight David Benavidez, right? Unless David Benavidez, again, loses to somebody, then all bets are off. But I like this 3-fight deal, and I'm glad that Edgar Berlanga, who fights this coming weekend, is no longer he's not gonna have the specter of that, the possibility of the Canelo fight next. So if Berlanga obliterates Jason Quigley, they were talking about the next fight for Berlanga being Canelo Alvarez. I'm like, what? So I'm glad that that's not going to happen, because all this that I'm talking about with Edgar Berlanga, that's all taking place on DAZN. So if Canelo were going to have continued to work with Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, and to fight on DAZN, that would have really soured me to Canelo's matchmaking. Look, I gave him a pass, and I think most of us should have given him a pass for fighting John Ryder, right? Who I believe was one of his mandatories. He had just had an onslaught of tough fights, and he had fought Caleb Plant after fighting Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, and then fighting that loss against Dimitri Bivol, and then fighting Triple G a third time. Okay, let's give him a pass. Let him fight John Ryder. He was, again, recovering from a hand surgery. So if that's your bounce back fight, make the next one a tough fight. So I've got my eyes on what the actual next fight for Canelo is going to be. And if it is Jermall Charlo, then David Benavidez better be the next one. I'm not totally mad at the Jermall Charlo fight. Again, I just don't think that the circumstances bode well for Jermall Charlo. He just picked a hell of a time for this fight to come together. And I don't love it. Kaladen Kabata. Oh, city neighbor, Long Beach in the house? Oh, you stay in Compton? Yeah, right next door to Long Beach. Thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome. Yeah, thanks for coming through. EK says, I feel like Canelo done enough. He's just coasting to retirement. It's okay. But Canelo has always struck me as being somebody who's like a legacy builder. He's always like looking at what's next. What's the next giant I can slay, right? We remember when it was, he went after, Floyd Mayweather. But then he fought Triple G, and that was a big deal. Those back-to-back fights were kind of, regardless of what we thought about those decisions, those were Canelo's king-making fights. It was those back-to-back fights against Triple G. If for nothing else, fighting a near-even fight twice against Triple G, 24 rounds against the guy, never hit the canvas, right? So then it's like, okay, then he had the Rocky Fielding fight, fought Daniel Jacobs, and then what? He goes to 168. I'm going to conquer that division, which he did, minus David Benavidez. Well, now the Mexican monster known as David Benavidez has beaten Caleb Plant, and everybody's now looking at, Canelo Alvarez like, hey, you going to handle your business? That right? That's kind of how the boxing community is now looking at Canelo. But Canelo tried to slay another dragon when he went up to 175 to fight Dimitri Bivol. So now the elephant in the room is now David Benavidez. And I find it hard to think that Canelo is now at a point where he's just coasting to retirement. Now, he is making upwards, $100 million, right? This is a 3-fight deal that's reportedly for $100 million, plus I'm sure pay-per-view incentives and so forth. For that money to make sense to PBC, they're going to have to pair him with a David Benavidez or, with opponents that make things interesting. So if he was coasting to retirement, I just don't think that his fight-by-fight trajectory wouldn't include David Benavidez, right? And, to be honest, if he were, there was a rumor for a moment that he was going to fight Badu Jack, the cruiserweight, the cruiserweight belt holder who just beat Ilunga Jr. Makabu. And then, it was rumored or reported that there was going to be a catch weight that would have required the 200-pound Badu Jack, who used to fight at 168, then 175, but the 200-pound Badu Jack to come down to like 180 or some weight that Badu Jack and his team did not agree to. I would have hated for that fight to have taken place, especially if they were going to require Badu Jack to like sweat himself in an unhealthy way just so he can make weight and to make Canelo feel more comfortable with that fight. I don't like that type of stuff. I didn't like the rehydration clause between Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia. I didn't like any of that. Yeah, Go Swang, what's going on? No passes. Canelo is holding the belts. If he wants an easy fight, drop the belts. Now, I do agree with that. When you are the undisputed champion, with that distinction comes responsibilities, right? You've got your mandatories, and sometimes you've got multiple sanctioning bodies mandating that you fight a certain fighter. So in that regard, yeah, you're gonna have to play ball if you want to hold those belts. Just like Jermall Charlo has been out of the ring for 2 years. Poor, Carlos Adames has beaten Derevianchenko, has beaten Juan Montiel. He's basically fighting all these people and has been like an interim WBC champ for some time. And it looks like he still might not get an actual WBC middleweight title shot. And he's fighting, by the way, again, this weekend against Julian J. Rock Williams. So yeah, I feel bad for those guys who are like in waiting and whose careers are essentially kind of stalled. I mean, they could still schedule fights, but their title aspirations are stalled because the true champ isn't handling their divisional business, if you will. Blake Arrowwood said, Jermell Charlo, the 154 undisputed champ, don't fight Tim. So Jermell Charlo, the other Charlo brother, has been battling a hand injury. He had a really nasty hand break by the reports accounts. He had a hand break in his preparation because the fight was actually scheduled between Jermell Charlo and Tim Tszyu. But then Jermell Charlo broke his hand in preparing for that fight, and it's been a long road to recovery. So Tim Tszyu, in the interim, fought former champ Tony Harrison, stopped him, and then just fought Carlos Ocampo, blew him away in the first round. I did not expect that. But yeah, Tim Tszyu's looking like an absolute beast. So now that he's been handling business, he being Tim Tszyu, in the interim, if you will, hopefully Jermell Charlo is healthy enough where they can now make that fight, because I really want to see that fight. I look at that as being a very competitive fight between Jermell Charlo and Tim Tszyu. But to answer your question, I mean, that's why Jermell Charlo hasn't yet fought Tim Tszyu. Kaladin Kabata, and correct me on my pronunciation, David Morrell Jr. at 168, it is looking like a problem. He's technically sound, he's fast, he's a southpaw, he's a Cuban fighter, but doesn't fight like your quintessential Cuban traditionally, like Guillermo Rigondeaux or Erislandy Lara. He puts his foot on the gas. Early we just saw him blow Falcao out like in the first couple of rounds. But David Morrell Jr., it looks like if Canelo isn't going to fight Benavidez next, that it's going to be David Morrell Jr. And I'll be honest with you, if I was Benavidez sitting where I sit as one of Canelo's mandatory opponents and the guy who, most fight fans want to see fight Canelo and are basically publicly, pressuring Canelo to fight, I wouldn't take a fight with David Morrell Jr. Like that is such a high risk, low reward proposition. And if David Benavidez does take that fight, look, I'll tip my cap to him, but I wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? Like, there's just way too much to lose. And it was really that fight, that win against Caleb Plant, that should have ensured that David Benavidez get that opportunity against Canelo. So we'll see what this 3-fight deal consists of and what the next step for Canelo is. Because I'm waiting. Look, if it's Jermall Charlo, all right, that's cool. Jermall Charlo at his best is a very good fighter. I just question whether he's at his best. And to be honest with you, when he did that interview with Mike Tyson on Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson, I didn't love the tenor of the conversation. Now, I like Mike Tyson, obviously. I love Mike Tyson, and I like Jermall Charlo. Like, you know, in terms of, you know, just as a person and as a boxer, I didn't love how he sounded in his fighting spirit. Because he was like, you know, I follow the Mayweather model. And then I'm thinking, well, no. The Mayweather model means that you fought Diego Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo and Chiquitito Gennaro Hernandez and, you know, all the different guys that Floyd Mayweather was fighting at, you know, 130, 135, you know, Zab Judah, Arturo Gatti, all the tough fights that Mayweather had before he had his king-making opportunity against Oscar De La Hoya. You know, yes, Jermall Charlo was a belt holder at 154, but his 160 run, aside from that Derevianchenko fight, that was atrocious. That was like Jaime Munguia bad in terms of your fight-by-fight, you know, schedule. So I didn't love how he sounded. He sounded like he was willing to just like kind of sit out and to fight a bunch of bums and just wait for a big money-making opportunity. And to me, that's what separates the two brothers, Jermall versus Jermell. Jermell, he's hell-bent on establishing a legacy. Just look at what he did at 154. You know, he ran it back with Tony Harrison, got the stoppage, ran it back after fighting a draw with Brian Castano, stopped him in the middle rounds. He seems intent on proving to everybody that he's the baddest man in the division, right? And so I just wish that Jermall Charlo showcased some of that spirit of his twin brother, Jermell Charlo. And he, at this point, since he moved to middleweight, I just haven't seen that. Let me get to a couple of the comments while I sip. So, you know, I don't know. Has the sanctioning body, the WBC and Mauricio Suleiman, said that Jermall Charlo, Jermell Charlo would be stripped? Which sanctioning body said that he would be stripped if he doesn't fight by September? Because the way that it works for like an undisputed champ, and again, now I'm talking about the smaller brother, Jermell Charlo, the one who has shown that champion's spirit. Usually, like they did with Josh Taylor, one by one, the sanctioning bodies will give out their mandate. Like the IBF might say, you got to fight our guy, you know, and if you don't, we'll strip you of that belt, but you still hold on to the other three. So if there was a sanctioning body that put pressure and said that you got to make this fight with Tim Tszyu by a certain date, that would just be that one sanctioning body. And I think that he would forfeit one belt, but not all of the belts. I also want to get to, okay, so there are a couple fights taking place this weekend, and they're not the same blockbuster marquee fights that we've been spoiled with. You know, I mean, how often do us boxing fans get spoiled with fights? But I mean, we've had Devin Haney versus Lomachenko. We've had Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia. We just got Josh Taylor versus Teofimo Lopez. This coming weekend, we have, as I mentioned, Carlos Adames defending his interim middleweight WBC status against Julian J. Rock Williams, who used to hold belts at 154. That might be Jermall Charlo's best opponent, best win, is when he stopped Julian J. Rock Williams. Now, I think that J. Rock is it's kind of on the decline. We've seen him get stopped by Jason Rosario, and we saw him lose a fight that he was winning when he was on his comeback trail. Well, since that, he's won a fight, and now he finds himself in a pretty good opportunity against Carlos Adames. I'm favoring Carlos Adames pretty heavily in this one. As I said, I think J-Rock is on the decline. I just hope that if Carlos Adames handles business, that he does get the Jermall Charlo fight. If not, if Charlo fights Canelo, then I hope that they take that WBC belt from Jermall Charlo, and that Carlos Adames is either elevated from interim champ status to full champ, or that there's a vacant title fight between Carlos Adames and whoever else the WBC says is going to fight for that 160-pound title. That's one of the worst divisions in the sport as it stands right now, because you just have too many champions and you're not getting enough, you're not getting any unification title fights. And it's been that way for a couple years now. And we also have, by the way, we were talking about this a little bit at the top of the hour, but Joshua Franco fighting Kazuto Ioka. Now, this is their second fight. They fought to a draw the first time, but when they weighed in, and by the way, if you're trying to watch this fight, it's taking place in Tokyo, so set your alarms super early. But Joshua Franco just missed weight by a few pounds, so he just got stripped of his title. So going into Franco versus Ioka, it's only Ioka who stands to gain and win a title, the WBA, super flyweight title in that fight. Which is, no, I think it's just the flyweight title, right? 112. No, it's 115 because Bam Rodriguez went down to 112. So yeah, it's only Ioka who could win that title because Joshua Franco blew weight, which is super unfortunate. And I was mentioning, I wonder if he's now going to go up to bantamweight, and they just made the fight between Bam Rodriguez and Sonny Edwards. Well, they're talking about making that fight. It sounds like the fight is agreed to, but it's not yet official. But if Bam Rodriguez beats Sonny Edwards in that title unification fight, I wonder if now that his brother seemingly can't make weight at 115 anymore, if Bam Rodriguez then goes back to 115 where he's already beaten Carlos Cuadras and Sor Rungvisai. If he goes back to 115, and then maybe, just maybe, we can get like Bam Rodriguez versus Chocolatito, or Bam Rodriguez versus Estrada, fights like that. Kendall Cody, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much and welcome. Yeah, thanks. And again, I just want to say I'm glad that I'm back on this live chat. I really missed it over the past like several months. I was doing a string of live chats before, and there were just too many technical glitches where the stream would cut. And so you might see him in the comments, Sup Swoles, that's my fam Joe. He hooked me up, man. Like he set me up with a new, new computer, new softwares, I got a new Sony camera. So, I was doing all the live streams before and all my videos before off of like this old iPhone. And I would just like set it up on a tripod and just run it like that. I was doing the audio and the video through that. So now I've got like this blue mic. I've had this for a minute. I just got this Sony. So technically, we're in a better spot, and I look to do a lot more live streams going forward, as well as the fight previews and fight recaps and so forth. I also want to do some like historic pieces where you look at a certain time, a part of the boxing timeline, like a hypothetical Klitschko versus Klitschko, something like that, or looking at different classic fights and analyzing that, or looking at divisions and saying who are the top, X fighters from this decade, just doing different things where we could take more of the historical perspective from boxing into some of these videos rather than just doing previews and recaps. You know what I mean? But yeah. Thank you everybody who came through to this one. There was one more fight taking place. One more main event taking place this weekend. And it's between Edgar Berlanga and Jason Quigley. Now, Quigley, we saw get stopped badly by Demetrius Andrade, who isn't known as a knockout artist, but he stopped Quigley like in the first couple of rounds. Edgar Berlanga famously had his first 16 professional fights end in first round knockouts. Not just knockouts, but first round knockouts. And then his next 3 fights were decision wins. And I would say in 2 of those 3 fights, he looked pretty good against Damon Nicholson. He got knocked down in the second of those 3 fights, but he won it, via decision. And then he fought Romer Alexis Angulo. And that's the one where he bit Angulo, was suspended. Now, he's had a couple injuries, and, kept him out of the ring. But this is Edgar Berlanga, the first round knockout artist, returning to the ring against Jason Quigley. This is his first fight, his being Berlanga, in this new Matchroom deal. So this is his first fight on DAZN. I just wonder if some of the air has been taken out of his sails now that he knows that Canelo is not going to be in the immediate horizon, since now they're going to be on different platforms, because it sounded like they were angling for that. Now, if Edgar Berlanga handles business against Quigley, which I expect him to. By the way, Quigley beat Shane Mosley Jr. back in the day. That might be Quigley's best win. But if Berlanga handles business against Quigley, I would love to see Edgar Berlanga versus Jaime Munguia. And now that Canelo's off the table, seemingly, and both Edgar Berlanga and Jaime Munguia are fighting on the same platform, different promoters, Berlanga's with Eddie Hearn Matchroom and Jaime Munguia's with Oscar De La Hoya, Golden Boy. They fight on the same platform, so that's an easy fight to make. And who wouldn't like to see Jaime Munguia versus Edgar Berlanga, especially now that it seems like Jaime Munguia has left the 160-pound division? I would really want to see that fight, and there's no reason not to make it. And you can make it in, at Madison Square Garden. Edgar Berlanga's a New Yorker, Puerto Rican. You could do it in New York, or you could do it like in California. Huge Latino population out here. I go to a lot of fights in Carson. I love that venue, but I feel like Munguia versus Berlanga, you could do that one at the Crypto, formerly the Staples Center. You could probably do that one at the Crypto Arena. A bigger venue than the one in Carson, which is where I actually saw Regis Prograis beat Zepeda. And before that, I saw Jermell Charlo stop Brian Castano. I love that Carson venue because you get a lot of value. It's not as expensive as the bigger venues, and you could get good seats for like less than $150. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool. But yeah, I would love to see Berlanga versus Jaime Munguia, especially because Jaime Munguia has had a really bad fight-by-fight schedule. It's been super frustrating just tracking his career fight over fight. Let's see. Before we wrap it up, are there any other topics that we want to talk about briefly? Blake Arrowwood said, I hope Nakatani and Estrada have a unification match. Yes, Junto Nakatani is looking like a bad boy. I did not expect to see him knock Maloney out like that. Like, that was a scary knockout. It's a contender, a candidate for knockout of the year. And it's one of those knockouts where the guy knocks the person out and they just kind of do like a very casual stroll or like a prance around the ring. It was jarring to see Maloney get knocked out like that. That's one of those career shortening knockouts, I hate to say. But yeah, Junto Nakatani is looking pretty lethal in there. And yeah, I would love to see a unification fight between he and Juan Estrada. And by the way, if I could, I'll see if I could try to pull this up really quickly. I had updated I've been doing a lot of shorts lately as well, where you just do like a 1 minute or less video, just either on a topic or something like that. And those ones you have to keep pretty quick. But I did update my top 10 pound for pound recently, and I'm just going to kind of run through it really quickly. So at number 1, let's see. Can I find this? I'll see if I could do this one off the top of my head. It's not. I've got my 11 through 20 in front of me, but okay. Number 1 was Terrence Crawford. I have him as my number 1 pound for pound right now. Okay, before I get into the pound for pound, I'm going to answer this question from Francisco Velasquez. What's going on, Francisco? Thank you. Methods of victory for the weekend. I've got Carlos Adames beating Julian J. Rock Williams. I was going to go stoppage, but I'm going to go via decision. I've got Franco beating Ioka. So I think that the belt is going to be vacant after Franco defeats Ioka via decision. And then I'm going Edgar Berlanga stopping Jason Quigley. So my number 1 pound for pound, Terrence Crawford, Benny Bronx in the house. Long time. Yeah, welcome and thank you. Yeah, good to see you. Good to hear from you. Terrence Crawford's my number 1. Canelo's my number 2. I've got Errol Spence at number 3. I've got Alexander Usyk at number 4, and I won't argue with anybody who has Usyk higher. Usyk to me could be anywhere 1 through 3 or 4. I've got Naoya Inoue, number 5. I've got Tyson Fury, the Gypsy King. A lot of people don't put heavyweights in their top 10. I do include heavyweights in my top 10, but I kind of grade them on a curve, especially if they weren't coming up from cruiserweight or light heavyweight. So Tyson Fury is 6, but you know, if you're talking about the best fighter in the world, you could make an argument for Tyson Fury. Absolutely. I've got Dimitri Bivol as my number 7. I've got Jermell Charlo as my number 8. I've got Gervonta Tank Davis moving up from my number 14 to number 9 with that dominant knockout over Ryan Garcia. So Davis is 9. And then I've got Devin Haney making the top 10 with that close and controversial win over Vasily Lomachenko. I could even take you really quickly through the 11 through 20. I've got Artur Beterbiev is my number 11. I've got Teofimo Lopez, number 12. I've got Shakur Stevenson, number 13. Juan Estrada, number 14. Stephen Fulton is my number 15. David Benavidez, my number 16. Emmanuel Navarrete is my 17. Regis Prograis at 18. I've got Bam Rodriguez at 19. And then Josh Taylor still in my top 20. He's my number 20. Let's see. So we're about to wrap this up in a second. And as I said, look, I did this one without a schedule. I just wanted to get back into the flow of the live stream. Going forward, I'm going to have these scheduled, at least like if I do it in the afternoon, I'll have it like up like as a coming soon in the morning. But yeah, I just wanted to chat with you guys, get back into the flow, test some of this tech, the camera, the mic, just, work around glitches, or if there was going to be any troll in the comment section, work on kind of snuffing those out. Right. So, yeah, thank you for coming through. It's been a minute. It's been several months since the last live chat, but, Benny Bronx thinks that Julian J. Rock Williams is upsetting Carlos Adames. That would be pretty wild. And man, that would be a big comeback victory for Julian J. Rock Williams. I don't know if it's just the East Coast love at play right here, because I know, well, J. Rock's from Philly, right? Not New York, but yeah, I don't know if that's a East Coast wishful thinking, or if it's actually going to happen. But man, I mean, J. Rock just hasn't looked as technically sharp in the second half of fights. He's looked good in the first half of fights, but in the second half, I feel like I'm seeing like erosion, or maybe his legs aren't the same. But if he does pull off that win against Adames, that would be something else. You know what? And when I had released that 1 minute short on that top 10, a lot of people took issue with either with Terrence Crawford being at number 1 or with Canelo at being number 2. I feel like Canelo has been penalized a little bit too heavily for his last few fights. Like, how heavily do you punish him for losing that decision against Dimitri Bivol? Okay, for me, it took him out of the number 1, put him at number 2. But I don't think you should get penalized for beating Triple G and John Ryder via decision. I don't think you should get lowered necessarily in the top 10 ranking. Those are still quality fighters. I mean, who else is beating Triple G? And yes, we might never see Triple G again, right? Like, I don't know what to make of this juncture of Triple G's career. But again, I just don't think that Canelo should be penalized as harshly as I see some penalizing him in the wake of these last couple fights. But yeah, thanks again. Once again, everybody who made it through to this live chat. We're going to do this again soon. I want to do it kind of recapping this coming weekend. So hopefully by like Tuesday or Wednesday, we could get the next live chat going. And I'm going to be doing previews on next week's fights as well. So yeah, I'm glad that I'm talking with y'all once again. I missed this. So yeah, now that we got this one under us, I can't wait for the next one. So yeah, please like the video if you haven't. When I join live chats, I've got a habit of going into the, into the comments, right? Because I want to like engage and stuff like that. But then I always forget to like do the like. So if you haven't liked, please do. And yeah, until next time, I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.